All right, so for this video, I'm going to talk about how every religion is united by the common goal of getting out of here, right? And in particular, I want to talk about the big four religions, which are Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. But you could argue that these are essentially two flavors. Essentially, you have the Western Abrahamic monotheistic religions, and then you have the Eastern reincarnation religions, right? But what is the goal? What is the end goal? What is the thing that's promised at the end of the line? For all these religions, it's a way out of here, right? That's what every form of at least mainstream spirituality or every ubiquitous form of a spirituality promises a way out of here. That's one of and in the Abrahamic monotheistic faiths, it's about going to heaven. Essentially, that if you worship Jesus, if you're saved by the blood of Jesus, if you worship Allah and you follow the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, then you'll be divinely compensated or rewarded in exchange for your suffering on earth, in exchange for your fealty and loyalty to the one true God. Right. So that is the general theme of the Abrahamic religions is going to heaven as like the main goal. Essentially, like after you die, you want to go to a better place. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat in the church and I've heard people say, "Oh, I can't wait to go to heaven." Right? That they're in all manner of suffering. They have problems with their family, problems with their parents, problems with their children, right? Problems with people at the workplace, chronic illnesses, physical injuries, and like the one thing that these people have going in their lives is that they can't wait to go to heaven. They can't wait to, or it's either that or the rapture that they can't wait for, right? And so it's kind of interesting how people will look at you sideways for calling it a prison planet, but there's a lot of people that just can't wait to get out of here, right? And after they die, they don't want to come back here. They want to go to a better place. At least that's the Abrahamic faith's sort of version of it is. You want to go to heaven as sort of the end goal, whatever purpose you think you have on earth, whatever mission you think you have on earth, whether you think that earth is a school for learning lessons, is to develop your soul, whatever purpose you think you have on earth, the goal seems to be to get out of here, right? And we go to the reincarnation religions, which are more sort of obvious about this sort of point, which is that it's about attaining nirvana or moksha or liberation from the wheel of samsara, from the reincarnation cycle, right? And that if you follow the eightfold path, if you meditate hard enough, then you can essentially transcend and see through the illusion of Maya in order to get out of here. But yet again, the common goal here, whether it's going to heaven after you die or whether it's exiting the reincarnation cycle by attaining enlightenment or attaining moksha or Buddhahood, becoming a Buddha, becoming an enlightened person, right? Whatever the goal, like whatever the path is, like it does seem to be that there is a common goal of getting out of this realm, that everyone wants to get out of this realm, or at least that does seem to be like and the reason I call these the big four, like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, is that these are the religions that the majority of the human population believe in, right? So these are the big four religions, and so they describe sort of a trend and I think that the common points of agreement in religion are definitely important to talk about. And I think that there's this sort of misconception that all I did was I just like read like Gnostic texts or whatever, or like I looked into Gnosticism, and like I just took it and ran with it, and like that's it. Like I'm not really concerned about like the Sophia or the Aeons or whatever. Like, I think Sophia is a bitch ass single mom, and like that the Demiurge is like the iPad kid, running around. Like I think that the common points of agreement in religion are really what convinces me of the theory of the soul trap, of the prison planet, of the reincarnation trap. That's more of what it is. It's common points of agreement of demons. Whether you call them demons or jinn or archons or Draco reptilians or gray entity or gray aliens, or so some people talk about the mantis entities, the mantids. Um, but like those common points of agreements, that common point of agreement between cultures that had zero contact with each other, that's one of the things that I think points to a common phenomena, right? And so demons are one thing, the existence of psychic abilities and magic are another thing, and another example of this common point of agreement is the existence of flood myths throughout the world. I'm reading a book on Atlantis right now, and it's kind of insane how every culture has some form of like an account of a global deluge that flooded the earth, and that there's an account of civilizational forebearers coming from an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, right? But I say all that to say that common points of agreement between religion are really what I'm concerned about. It's not so much that I ascribe to, because I don't agree necessarily with like, I think that any dogma that you come across, any belief system that you come across, I think I like to analyze the common points of agreement in belief systems. I don't like to subscribe to just one belief system or one dogma, right? Because I think that that is a trap. I think that this whole hierarchy of the aeons, Sophia and all this other stuff, like it is a hierarchical structure, and this idea that you're worshiping another entity is also, I think, another trap, right? But I use the demiurge. I use like the term the demiurge and the archons as a term in my videos to describe what's happening. But the prison planet theory is something that you can come up with, just by first of all, just by observation, just observation of this reality, observation skills, looking at the nature of this reality. But also, yet again, if you look at the common points of agreement between those big four religions, right, and just the majority of humanity's spiritual traditions, is that it does seem to be a goal to get out of this realm, whether it's by transcending, whether it's by becoming enlightened, whether it's by ascending to heaven, going to a better place after you die, escaping the reincarnation cycle, attaining moksha or liberation. It does seem to be a common goal that nobody really wants to be in this realm. It's not the goal to stay in this realm. The goal is to even if you're a new ager who thinks that like you have to pay back your karmic debt and that Earth is a school, which I don't believe in. I think that the New Age is definitely a psyop. Like this whole like love and light, good vibes only kind of an attitude that they have, and I don't agree at all with a lot of the New Age sort of doctrines. But like even if you think that Earth is a school, the goal is to graduate. The goal is to get out of here. But no, like you have the memory wipe whenever you reincarnate. Right. And so I think that, it's a very interesting thing how, people will look at you sideways, and people will look at you like you're crazy, like you have two heads, like you have eight eyes or something like that. Like they'll look at you crazy for calling it a prison planet. But at the same time, the goal is to get out of here. Right. Like the goal is to go to heaven. Right. People say, I can't wait to go to heaven. Or people, work their entire lives in order to attain liberation or enlightenment, to see through the illusion of Maya. Right. And another thing, too, that I think I really notice when it comes to just the majority of spiritual traditions, they talk about the material realm in a very disfavorable manner. Right? You look at, look at Christianity, right? Like be in the world, but not of the world. Love not the world or the things of the world. Right. And then, of course, you have like the devil bargaining with Jesus, saying, all of this can be yours. Like he shows like him all the lands of the world, all the kingdoms of the world, all this can be yours if you bow before me. There's even Christians that, say that, the world's owned by the devil, the world's run by the devil, right? And they'll say things like this, and then they'll scoff at the idea of a prison planet, even though in the same breath, right? In the same breath that they say the world's run by the devil, the world's owned by the devil, right? And you look at the satanic elites, and you look at how people make Faustian bargains in order to get monetary success, in order to get fame, and all this other stuff, right? You can look at that, and it's very obvious that the idea of a prison planet or the idea of a soul trap is a thing, right? But these people will look at you like you're crazy if you call it a prison planet, even though what they're describing, the way that they talk about the material realm, as like at best, the material realm is described as a distraction from the things of the spirit. They talk about temptations. They talk about how the things of this realm are a distraction from the things of the spirit, right? And at worst, people describe the material realm as a prison, right? But they say I think the Buddhist just straight up says life is suffering, existence is suffering, and he says like the goal is to escape the wheel of samsara, right? But like however these religious traditions describe it, it's a very common point of agreement, or it's a very common sentiment, that the material realm is not a very favorable thing. It's not a thing that is talked about in a very favorable light necessarily. It's not something that is very the material realm is not looked upon as a good thing. It's looked upon as something that is, yet again, like the illusion of Maya. It's something that is distracting to your senses, that immerses you in an illusion that you need to break out of, right? But and you look at the existence of monasteries, whether it's the like the Orthodox monastery in Mount Athos, or whether it's the the Buddhist monasteries, like what is the goal of a monastery? The goal of a monastery is to isolate oneself from the outside world, essentially, right? To isolate oneself from the things of the world, right? And so it's kind of interesting how spiritual pursuits and spirituality in general seems to be correlated with this sort of disfavorable view of the material realm. That the material realm it's a distraction, it's bad, it's meaningless. The pursuits that like like the pursuit of the things of the world is not something that is worthwhile in the long run. And so like isolating from the material realm, like think about like minimalism, right? Getting rid of your material possessions, stuff like that. That is a general theme. Yet again, it's not isolated to just one religion or one doctrine. This is a general theme that isolating yourself from the material realm, and this idea of the material world being a distraction. At best it's a distraction, or at worst it's a prison, right? So I think it's very interesting that you need to look at common points of agreement, in anything, because I think there's a real thing going on that I think transcends all of the religious accounts of things. I think that anything that anything that points to a common point of agreement is definitely indicative of something true. Whether and yet again, you look at the existence of demons, the existence of whether it's Satan, the devil, Lucifer, Shaitan in Islam. Or I think in Buddhism they call the demon Mara, right? Like the demon that runs like samsara is like called Mara in Buddhism. Whether you have like the Native American and shamanic traditions, they call it the evil one, right? And you have like the Gnostics, they call it the demiurge, right? Like these are different names for the same thing. These are different names for the same force. And it's the same thing for demons, archons, jinn, evil spirits, right? Like it's the same thing, and I think that's what really compels me to think that this realm is a prison planet, or it compels me to believe like a lot of other things about the nature of this realm. Is whenever you have intersecting beliefs, across cultures that don't contact one another, that's a sign that there's something real going on in the middle, and that these are different interpretations of the same thing. And so I think that is, a very interesting thing. But yet again, if we go back to the original subject of, what I'm trying to say here, every religion seems to have the common goal of getting out of here. The goal is to get, your Charlie and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket to heaven in the West, and in the East, the goal is to escape the cycle and attain enlightenment or moksha or liberation. Right. So I think that is one of the biggest proofs of a prison planet or a prison realm or a soul trap, is the fact that spirituality in general seems to be united by the goal of getting out of this realm, right? Because if you really probe, like, okay, what do you expect by following this spiritual path, right? Like, yet again, whatever purpose you think you have on earth, whether it's you think that you have a mission to fulfill, you think you have a karmic debt to pay back, you have lessons to learn, or whatever, yada yada yada. Okay, and then what? And then what? And then what? Right? If you ask and you sort of probe, like, what is promised at the end of the line is heavenly rewards, divine compensation, or liberation from the reincarnation cycle. So it's about getting out of here. Every religion seems to be about getting out of here. And I wouldn't say every religion. I'm pretty sure that there's some religious traditions that might not have that sentiment, but it does seem to be a general pattern that the goal is to not be here. The goal is to get out of here. The goal is to go to heaven or to attain nirvana. The goal is to not be here. And so I think that is one of the biggest proofs of this realm not being necessarily as benevolent as a lot of people think it is. But yeah, that's the video.